In 2011, Robert Macaulay published a book called Why Religion is Natural and Science is Not. Now, the title of course is meant to raise an eyebrow too, but the content of the book is well worth knowing about. So in this video, we're going to take a look at a field of study called the cognitive science of religion, using Macaulay's book as a basis to work from. Robert Macaulay is a professor of philosophy at Emory University, and he's also one of the leading contemporary cognitive scientists around. So what exactly is his book trying to say? Well, as a cognitive scientist of religion, Macaulay is interested in the relation of the mind to science and religion. Cognitive science is not the same as neuroscience, however. Cognitive scientists are interested not in the brain, but rather in the mind. They're interested in what the mind is, how it functions, and how people think. In relation to science and religion, cognitive scientists are not so much interested in the truth claims that both areas might make. Rather, they're interested in how, as humans, we think about science and religion, as well as the cognitive tools that enable us to think or act religiously or scientifically. Whether those thoughts or actions are true or not is of secondary importance. In the introduction to his book, Macaulay lays out the conclusion. He says, "This book compares science and religion in a way that has never been done before, and it has a surprising ending. Some books comparing religion and science touch on cognitive themes, but at least so far as I know, none makes cognition the focus of its comparisons. My thesis, in short, is that religion is cognitively natural and that science is not." On page 9, Macaulay lists out the 7 main conclusions that he'll draw by the end of the book. These are: traditional comparisons of science and religion are cognitively misbegotten. Theological incorrectness is inevitable. Science poses no threat to the persistence of religion. Relevant disabilities will render religion baffling. Science is inherently social. Science depends more fundamentally on institutional support than religion does. Science's continued existence is fragile. In this video, we aren't going to expand on every single conclusion just seen. Rather, my goal is simply to outline some of the key points. Of course, if you do want the full deal, then purchasing and reading the book is your best bet. Also, if you do like this video and want more informal reviews on science and religion content, then let me know in the comments below. Firstly, we need to understand that, as I said earlier, Macaulay is coming at this from a cognitive perspective, so he certainly doesn't mean that religion is true and science is false. What he and other cognitive scientists alike mean is that religion comes to the human mind far more easily than science does. Of course, science and religion themselves are not individual things. They comprise of multiple aspects, and so understanding how science and religion are viewed from a cognitive perspective provides a deeper layer in understanding how the two relate, beyond the old idea of conflict that seems to persist primarily in the West. There are a number of key cognitive terms that need to be broken down here. Those terms are natural, and within this category, maturational naturalness and practiced naturalness. Unnatural, reflective, and non-reflective. Natural cognition simply means the beliefs and also actions that are intuitive to us as humans. Maturational naturalness equates to those beliefs and actions that humans across the globe will exhibit despite having little to no training or instruction in developing them. So things like walking, crying, talking, empathy, and even illusions would be examples of maturationally natural cognition. Practiced naturalness equates to things that take much more practice to learn, but then are ultimately acquired to the point that they can become second nature. Such things might include learning to read and write, or riding a bike, or things like learning how to drive, or even understanding your local transport system and being able to successfully navigate it. Unnatural things, on the other hand, are things which are essentially counterintuitive to our minds. They require much more attention and constant maintenance if they are to be retained. A talking tree that could be in 2 places at once, or a human that could fly without any aid, would both be unnatural to the human mind, but so are most of the continued discoveries of science itself. Furthermore, much of theology is also unnatural to the mind. We'll come back to both of these a bit later in the video as they require some explaining. Reflective and non-reflective beliefs and actions are, in a sense, different words that mean the same thing as natural and unnatural beliefs and actions. Reflective beliefs are beliefs that we take the time to think about, weighing the evidence for and against. Non-reflective beliefs are beliefs that we immediately accept without actively thinking about or explicitly weighing the evidence for or against. In terms of actions, reflective actions are those which we think about before doing. For example, men and women actively competing in a sport. Lastly, non-reflective actions could be classed as immediate actions, such as our reflexes and other things we do automatically, such as blinking and breathing. So, in summary, here's how it might be presented visually. So let's focus on the science aspect. On page 106 of his book, Macaulay unpacks why science is unnatural from a cognitive perspective. He says that the deepest source of science's cognitive unnaturalness is the ever-growing disparity between our maturationally natural perceptions and intuitions about things and the very different picture of the world that science discloses. As the history of science has shown, the more we learn about science, the more complicated the universe gets. A simple example of this would be the well-known case of Galileo. Prior to Galileo, it was widely believed that the Earth was at the centre of the solar system, although at the time there were other competing theories. Galileo helped to show that the Sun was at the centre. However, most of us today still intuitively accept the pre-Galilean understanding. For example, when we talk about the Sun rising. Plus, when we simply observe the Sun in our place on Earth, it just kind of seems like the Sun is doing all the moving while the Earth remains stationary. This is interesting because, as opposed to the usual historical reason that has argued that people held to an Earth-centric view purely because the Catholic Church taught it, there's a cognitive underpinning for this understanding which turns out to still be active today in basically all of us. When we probe further, Newton discovered the law of gravity and described it mathematically, but he had no idea what it actually was or how it fundamentally worked. A few centuries later, Einstein told us that gravity was essentially a curvature of time and space. Edwin Hubble and others showed that the universe is actually expanding rather than static. Quantum mechanics tells us that at the fundamental level, the universe consists of fields, not particles. Rigorous study by Leonardo da Vinci in the 16th century and later Lord Rayleigh in the 19th century revealed how some birds, such as the wandering albatross, can soar in the air for practically thousands of miles without flapping their wings once using something known as wind shears. Genetic research reveals that DNA is the molecule that stores our genetic information, which in turn is made up of 4 base pairs named A, T, C and G. The list of course could go on. And aside from all of this, science itself is very recent, having its origins primarily in the West, only about 400 to 500 years ago. The fundamental point with all this is to say that all of these examples are extremely counterintuitive to how we would intuitively view the world. In other words, without high-level scientific investigation, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to come to terms with these aspects of nature. They don't come naturally to the mind. So with this understanding, let's compare science to religion. Why does Macaulay say that religion is natural? We'll look at belief in God as our focus, although the term religion in no way only equates to belief in God. For a deeper analysis on the various meanings of religion, check out the video What is Religion by the academic YouTube channel Religion for Breakfast. In chapter 4 of his book, Macaulay sets out the terms for the naturalness of religion. One of the primary points raised about religion is that religion arises in every human culture, i.e. it is universal across all time and place. Even today, about 75% of the world consists of the 4 major religions, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism. And this percentage of course increases if we include all of the other world religions. Crucially, from his own influential cognitive research, plus others in the field such as Justin Barrett, the fundamental reason as to why religion is so persistent in humans is that religion is a cognitive rather than cultural construct. Ultimately, studies reveal that maturationally natural cognitive systems influence religion far more than they influence science. This is quite literally to say that at a fundamental level, we probably can't get rid of religion because it's embedded within us. So let's discuss some of these cognitive systems that aid religion. Two of the most important of these cognitive systems are the Agency Detection Device, or ADD, and Theory of Mind, or TOM. ADD in simple terms is the cognitive device that enables us to perceive agency in the world. It's what makes us immediately jump to the conclusion that, for example, a stranger is downstairs in the living room when we hear a loud noise, when we're sure that our house is supposed to be empty. Whenever humans personify inanimate objects like cars or musical instruments or nature herself, this effectively is ADD at work. ADD develops very early in life and it's crucial in producing a stable social awareness of our surroundings as well as other people. Theory of Mind, or TOM, works with ADD. TOM is the cognitive system that allows us to think about what other people are thinking, i.e. to know that other people have thoughts. When we see another person besides ourselves, we can't see their thoughts, and so we determine what they're thinking based on their actions and our ability to realize that that person has thoughts and can think and feel. Macaulay points out that not everybody develops TOM to a standard level. Autistic people, for example, may have a lesser developed TOM, and so they might find it more difficult to perceive other people's thoughts or to empathize. But in general, for most humans, TOM and ADD were developed naturally by about the age of 7, without any training needed whatsoever. Belief in God develops primarily as a result of these two cognitive tools. ADD allows us first to perceive agency beyond visible nature, and then TOM works on top of that to allow us to perceive this invisible agent as having a mind with thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. This fits within at least a deistic or theistic framework, particularly the three monotheistic traditions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. In a nutshell, human cognition makes it easy to believe in God. This does not mean that theological doctrines are also natural. Macaulay and other cognitive scientists make a distinction between religion and theology, where religion is natural, but theology, like science, isn't. This is because, just focusing on concepts of God again, much of theological doctrine is counterintuitive, and the deeper one goes into it, just like with science, the more counterintuitive it gets. For example, cognitive experiments done in this area have shown that intuitive ideas of God are typically anthropomorphic in nature. However, when we read theological texts from monotheistic traditions, we see God as being non-physical and in all places at once, as being both man, spirit, and as being able to attend to millions of prayers at the same time. These traits are all counterintuitive to how we naturally envision God, and so they have to be learnt and remembered. Knowing this is actually very useful for religious and non-religious people alike, as it answers the question of why general religiosity is easy but theology is difficult. So, as a summary, science is cognitively unnatural whilst religion is cognitively natural. The laborious processes involved in scientific research, for example, government aid in the form of grants, labs and institutions, the chronic process of collecting and scrutinizing data, sometimes over a period of decades, the increasingly complicated accounts of how the universe works, which don't map onto our minds easily at all, make science difficult and unnatural to us. On the other hand, religious beliefs such as belief in God seem to come much more naturally to us, particularly due to the natural development of ADD and TOM. However, our ideas of God will tend to be much more anthropomorphic until we couple our intuitive ideas about God with the more counterintuitive theological notions of God from whichever theological traditions we might draw from. The biggest mistake to take away from all of this would be to jump to the conclusion that since we know the cognitive tools that produce religious thoughts, religion must be false, or that it's irrational to hold to non-reflective beliefs that haven't been tested reflectively. This type of conclusion is simply not warranted for a number of reasons that cognitive scientists, particularly Justin Barrett, would argue. The problem with this is that all of us as humans hold to numerous natural/non-reflective beliefs in exactly the same way that we hold to religious beliefs, and we feel justified in accepting those other beliefs without testing them reflectively. Examples of these other non-reflective beliefs would include the belief that I have a brain in my head, the belief that I exist, the belief that the past exists and the present exists and the future will exist, the belief that the laws of nature will remain the same tomorrow as they have been today. All of these are non-reflective, and we typically feel justified in holding to them. In fact, it would be quite strange if someone didn't accept these things as true. The philosopher Alvin Plantinga would call these types of non-reflective beliefs properly basic beliefs. Of course, one is free to transfer any of these beliefs from a non-reflective mode to a reflective mode, and in this process, some of these held beliefs might be shown to be faulty, but it isn't obvious which ones are faulty simply by virtue of them being natural and non-reflective. In summary, if religious beliefs are to be disproven, it would have to be done on the basis of explicit evidence, not based on the cognitive framework that they rest on. In fact, on a cognitive level, because religious beliefs can be held non-reflectively, just like other non-reflective beliefs, it's possible to make the case that a religious person is justified and rational in holding to their faith unless or until that belief is explicitly shown to be false. Because there is so much to unpack on this subject that I haven't been able to cover, I'll probably need to make a part 2 to this video, so let me know in the comments below if that's something you guys might want. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video on the relation of cognitive science to religion and science. Please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll be back with more videos soon.